to order at 7:02 p.m. Can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have anyone for public forum?
Ready? We have one person sign up. Is Stacy Patton? Not present.
Not present? Okay. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Can I get an approval of the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone abstaining?
No one.
Okay. Any opposed? Motion carries. Study items. RFP finalist, strategic planning by Dr. Jameson.
Good evening, board. The strategic plan or continuous improvement plan serves as our long-range planning tool for addressing student performance. As you're aware, the previous strategic plan expired, and we are in the process of actually getting new proposals. We had 3 companies submit proposals. In front of you, you should have 2 of those 3 based on the scoring. So the timeline that was outlined for proposals, we launched the RFP process on March 1st, the 25th, the window closed, and on April 21st, I'll give you a brief overview of the information that we found. So with those 2 finalists, Insight and Cambridge, the overall cost for proposal for Insight was $74,750 and Cambridge was $26,900. Cambridge does have additional fees that range due to additional services that we might need, so follow-up, support to buildings, and also support for the board as we look at implementing the actual plan. In addition, we evaluated the plan on 9 areas, and those areas were around qualification, understanding MRH needs, comprehensive approach to implementing the plan, which includes the timeline, metrics, objectives, and goals, expertise in strategic planning, their work with equity, stakeholder engagement, and ensuring that all stakeholders, even those who are marginalized, are brought to the table, the deliverables, the actual budget, and the references that they included inside of the proposals. Both of the 2 finalists have done work with school districts in Missouri and have a proven track record based on the references that were provided. Are there any questions about the 2 RFPs that were concluded at the virtual board meeting on May 5th? Those consultants will present their proposals, and then we'll have conversation and come back at the May meeting to vote on the company to facilitate our strategic planning work. Are there any questions?
I have a question. You mentioned the 9 areas and the scores on those different areas. Is that something that's summarized somewhere, what the areas are and the scores for each of the 2? Or even the 3rd one, maybe?
It is, and I can provide that information to you if you want me to do that. It's actually not public.
Oh, okay.
And so the cabinet actually went through and evaluated descriptions for each of those criteria were included, and for each of the companies that submitted, and each of the cabinet members actually included notes regarding each of those that were submitted. And the total scores for each of those were included as well, and where there were questions, we had follow-up conversation to ensure that those were answered for the members of cabinet. And I'll make sure you get that.
Any other questions? Thank you. Construction change orders, Chris?
Good evening, everyone. The change orders, there's only 2 this time around, since the ECC and elementary projects are all complete. The change orders here are related to the exciting items like shades, soil remediation, audio wiring in our stadium light pole, some temporary fencing, inspection of electrical equipment, wiring repairs in the gym, and some core drilling for a great stud. You see the amounts there. About $8,700 for one and about $26,600 for the other. So these are just a matter of course. Every time we put a shovel in the ground, we find something we didn't expect. Luckily, we're about out of the ground. Not quite out of there yet, but we're getting really close. So, any questions?
We still falling within the extra contingency?
Yes.
evaluation, gifted by Amy Kruger, Dan Lyons, and Deb, is it Reineke?
Reineke?
Reineke? Thank you, Deb.
Okay. All right, right here. All set? Good evening, everybody. I'm Deb Reineke. I am the gifted teacher over at the ECC. This is my colleague, Dan Lyons from the elementary school, and our colleague, Amy Kruger, is home ill tonight. We are going to be presenting our program to you tonight. So every 2 years, we complete an evaluation of our program. These evaluations give us time to evaluate and reflect upon our work. Past evaluations have helped us to ensure that our intervention program is based on best practices in identification and programming. We follow the definition set by the state of Missouri for gifted education. Based on the state's definition, gifted children are those who show earlier development in mental capacity and learning potential.
As we were thinking about this evaluation, our first steps we always do is looking at our foundational documents, re-examining those. Those are listed there. Do they still feel that they're true to our program? Do they still fit to what research is telling us for best practices? Before we begin, what is our gifted program? Our gifted program meets state criteria. At the ECC, the middle school, we meet more than the minimal hours that are allowed. The elementary is designed as a pull-out program where they're pulled out of classes for 180 minutes. And at the middle school, they meet within their normal rotation. So, when we began this study, where did we start? We start with our local connections, our friends in other districts that do gifted, asking about what their handbooks look like, what are they looking at, what are the things they're discussing. With that, our connections at our state conferences, so we can talk throughout the state. We also used, this year, we talked with our state gifted director, Christine Noby, and so we talked with her a couple times, so she gave us some guidance and guidance. And then we go national. What are our national organizations telling us? And then also, what are other states doing within their gifted programs and identifying for their programs? So, I'm catching up. We're catching up for Amy's part. So the first part of those foundational documents is our gifted rationale. From our research and what we found, we really felt that the rationale still fit for what we had. So we didn't make any changes to it. These are just the key points. Within your board docs, you have a PDF attachment. It's about 2 pages long, so we don't need to read that, but if you want to read more about that, feel free to look at that, please.
And then we looked at our philosophy and we reaffirmed that as well. We made no changes.
Here we made some changes. The state of Missouri does not have gifted identified standards for our program. Much like for reading, math, PE, they don't have anything for gifted. So when we began our research, we started looking with what our local districts do. We found, and even within the state, everyone does a little thing different. So we were looking at what research tells us. We talked to the gifted director. We were looking at what guidance from our national groups, and then also there are some states that actually have gifted standards identified. With looking at them, think of these as 2 columns. Our first column comes from an organization called ISTE, the International Society for Technology and Education. And those are those big, I guess, enduring understanding of big topics that they have identified within their group. We felt these were things that we were looking for. They align directly with the 21st century skills, which is what's telling us our gifted learners need. The other column comes from CASEL, which is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, Emotional Learning. A big part of our work with our gifted students isn't just enrichment, encouraging them to do things, but then also understanding who they are as learners and how they're interacting with people. These come from the 5 social emotional learning competencies that are important for our students to possess. So from these big ideas, these big topics, we created our outcome for graduates. Does that link work, or do you want to?
It does. It does.
Ooh, yay.
It's kind of hard to see this and visualize it with just those words up there. So basically, we took all of those topics that you saw in the 2 columns, empowering learner, and we divided it into bullets. These are our goals. We want our students leaving MRH that have been in our gifted program to be able to master, which is our goal. From this, on the next slide, because this stuff also, is our scope and sequence. So within our digital citizenship, we took these big ideas and then broke them down to our key stages. We have ECC, elementary, and then middle school and high school. And we have identified a progression of steps that a student going through our district, by the end, would be able to meet those goals that we have for our graduates. Something that we always do every year. We look at our students. Who are our students within the gifted program? And that comes down to the numbers and looking at our data. If you look at our column, we have 188 students that have been identified in MRH. That's about 14% of the population. Our gifted director feels that's a pretty common number. It's not too high, not too low. And they don't really focus on percentages that way as much, because districts are wrapped up into that and not really looking for students who are gifted or who qualify. They get the percentages and they might stop or do other things. That's not our goal here. It shows our female to male population. Our ideal is that our gifted population, ideally in a perfect world, would align and match to our gifted population. We took those numbers and we broke it up into our subgroups. What we found with this was we've always been looking at our underrepresented groups, which have been our African American students and our free and reduced selection students. Within the past 2 years, we noticed a gap that formed. We were making better grounds in our free and reduced lunch. Within the last 2 years, that percentage has dramatically dropped. Our ELL has dropped a little bit as well. And I'm sorry, our twice exceptional, which are students who might have IEPs, that has dropped a little as well. Due to what was going on, these are underrepresented groups. Our normal things that we have put in place to look at these students, doing observations, doing those sort of things, we're not able to do. So that is a concern to us as we're looking forward and planning.
Okay, so looking at our data, it has caused us to reflect on our screening protocols to determine potential causes of differences in our subgroup data. So we asked ourselves, do we have the most updated version of our assessment? Things changed during COVID. Do we have biases in protocols? Do we have a fair and accurate alternative pathways for identification? So these are some things that we have been considering.
And from directly looking at that data from the previous stage, looking at, we've seen a discrepancy. If you want to turn the slide, please. We're recommending starting next year, adding the Naglieri 3 into our universal screeners. All students at the end of first grade and all students that are new to MRH are universally screened. They come in, we look at the data. If we need to do some more assessments, we work with them. Part that we feel might be helpful to us is adding the Naglieri 3. I'm going to read this directly, make sure I get this worded right, because it is really important. The Naglieri measures nonverbal abilities. Research is telling us that that is a key to looking at students who might be from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, to helping us looking at that. It also eliminates factors such as language and learning disabilities, which hits more of our keys that we're looking at. And an advantage of this test is that it's culturally neutral. So we're looking at implementing this into next year's screening process, once we get all the documents and all the paperwork and getting thoroughly trained in it. And we hope that that is not, I don't see it as the golden ticket that's going to solve everything, but it's going to give us another insight, another way to look at a student that we might not have been able to do it so before. So, as we move forward, what's our goals? As we said, we usually come here every 2 years. With COVID, we got that bumped off. We weren't complaining. We do enjoy coming to see you. But for our first 2 years, our next 2 years, we're looking at, now that we have our standards that are identified, now that we have that scope and sequence, we're going to look back at our curriculum. Does it meet what we want it to now? Do we need to change things? And then going in and making sure our assessments are aligned to those standards that we've now created. We want to review the implementation of a high school standards in the service delivery model. That's something we've been working and trying to build stronger over the past few years. And then, of course, implement the Naglieri. See, that helps us with our overall numbers. If it's working, great. If not, continue to looking for more biases. Our goal is to look more proportional to our district. I know it's a lot of information, quick, but any questions?
Question, is it
Naglieri.
Naglieri 3, have there been any studies on how that has impacted the numbers?
It shows that it has helped. By looking at it being nonverbal, the first Naglieri came out in the early 2000s. And they first found that what they were claiming, the validity of the test was not as strong. Within the last 2 reviews, they fixed those issues. So the idea is that this one isn't that this one new piece of information is going to be an aha all of a sudden, but helping us look at the overall data that we collected. I will say that within our screening, we've changed some things to make them looking at where we have academic. We realized a couple years ago we didn't have a creativity or more nonverbal. So we've been trying to work that in. As we've been working in some of those more nonverbal areas or assessments, students that have started popping up, that we're having conversations with those teachers. So they may not be all of a sudden identified as gifted, but we start noticing things about them. And so that allows me as a gifted instructor to go into that classroom, talk with the teacher, and maybe see things that we normally didn't see before, just because, you know, we're doing so many different things and just having a different set of eyes and stuff. So that's sort of our goal.
We're actually really excited because it will be a universal screener, so we'll do it for every child, and the benefit of that is larger than just the gifted program, because we might find lots of students that have really strong critical thinking that we're missing in a more language-based test. So we think it's going to help us with our interventions across the board.
2 questions. One is, did I understand correctly that we, potentially not like other districts, we don't have a cutoff?
Percentage?
Of number of kids that can be in our gifted program?
Correct.
So if they fit the criteria, we have room for them?
If they fit this, we follow state criteria. So if they do fit that criteria, based on the state, what we're saying, that student qualifies. And we're doing a lot of talk like that again. Having a gifted kid and going through that, having where it's an entitlement, where we're gifted, so we're now a good parent, or the kid's amazing, but understanding and help the parents understanding what that means. And so if the student meets that criteria, we're saying that they do qualify for this intervention. Be it that we do find that there's worthy time that they're being pulled out of their regular instruction to do an aspect that maybe can't necessarily be reached in the traditional classroom. And those would be those social emotional pieces of anxiety, perfectionism. I can go off the list of different things. So it's not perfect, but that's.
And the second question is, do we have, and this is not just for gifted, so it might also be a question for you, Roxana. When we hear back from alumni, are we hearing that our program has helped them navigate? Because while yes, the gifted program has some educational advancement, it also has that social, emotional piece of helping to guide through the world. And so what are we hearing? Are we hearing anything about that?
I think Amy, who's not here tonight, would be the best person to answer because she's working directly with high school students and also the one that has kept, so I don't know that I'm able to answer your question, but I can certainly talk to Amy and get back to you.
I think the biggest thing is those connections that they have us for multiple years, and knowing in that trust where we do those social emotional work, where we're not counselors, but they open up with that trust. And so things that they may be more comfortable at home, I see, especially when I did second grade through sixth grade, they really opened up and able to talk through things. And they become like a little cohort where they trust each other and able to have those conversations as well of how are you feeling. So they're not really so they're not feeling as though they're the only one who gets anxious about this, but there's other people. So maybe I'm not that different. Or there's not something wrong with me. So I would say at that point, I think would strongly be yes, that's helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a couple questions, sorry. Just thinking about the educational equity policy that we have, and just wanting to, as part of this review, knowing that you only do this every couple of years, it's not necessarily a new policy, but I still think the 3 questions are relevant. So I wanted to just ask those 3 questions specifically with regard to this program. Whom does this benefit? Does this differentially impact racial and ethnic, gender and socioeconomic disabled groups? What can be included to decrease or eliminate disparities? With regard to those questions, I feel like the information you showed on your slides is very helpful for answering that question. It also meets our obligation to look at disaggregated data unflinchingly. That's great. I really appreciate that. I would like, if we could, just go a little bit deeper, and this doesn't have to be now, but just a suggestion or a question for further review. Could you look into, how do those statistics vary by grade level or maybe by building? What I'm thinking about is, like, if I'm a student in this program, especially if I'm relying on it for that sort of cohort feeling, are these people like me? If I'm a student in a grade or in a classroom where I'm the only person of color, which I think could happen, given those small numbers, am I still having that feeling of being included and being with people who are like me?
That's actually good research. I've read a lot on that.
Yeah.
Identifying underrepresented groups, and maybe only identifying one,
Right.
where you're the only one in there of whatever it is. And if you're not getting it like everyone else is, feeling more apart, more detracted from everyone else. So that is something that I have worked on to try to help support them that way. To, within the program, talking about a lot of them about not getting it first time, not being perfect, and not understanding, and always taking that chance and taking that step out. Our goal is not to have only one group, but then not making kids look like they're gifted or being gifted just to fit that quota. But that is something that we are really aware of. So when I'm making those connections with those kids, making sure that they're feeling apart, or even that if they are struggling in some way, coming back, having those conversations, having those relationships with how they're feeling, taking the temperature, how to best support them.
Can I jump in? I think also what's being asked when you say whom does it impact, and looking at the data, there are clearly some discrepancies there and some inequities. And so one of the things, in addition to the new assessment that will be implemented next year, is to explore ways to identify students who have talents. The neat thing about the work that we're doing and the new position that was approved by the board is that our human resources person will also be doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work, which will include an equity audit, and then also the work that we will do through the RFP with professional development to look at implicit bias. And I think that's some of what Dan identified. But I also hear you asking more about disaggregation of data to get a bigger picture across grade levels of how many students based on race, gender, free and reduced lunch, those who are underrepresented. We can bring that information back, and we will also bring back to you what additional things we can do. I will say that Dr. Steve Coxon at Maryville has a program that he works with students to identify talent, and so that's something that I would like to explore as we go into next year, and it's actually during the school day, and they fund that. So we will give an update on those pieces in the next board work session.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And the other thing I just wanted to call out, and thank you for your response to that, and also the comment you made about parents feeling like they're good parents or whatever, kids feeling like they're exceptional kids. I just want to call out that I want to think about the impact of this program to all the students when they see those statistics represented in this program. So how can we help all students feel as though that their specific gifts and are recognized and appreciated? That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Will we have an opportunity to see this data again in a year from now, based on the Naglieri data?
Yes.
Great.
And once, and that might be around the same time, but I definitely want to see how, I can't pronounce it, so I'm going to try, how it affects our data internally. Like, do we see a difference? I know that, and I appreciate that, Mr. Lyons, that you had mentioned, seeing if it works, and if it doesn't for us, looking at other options. So not being necessarily married to that if it doesn't help us, but seeing, you know, what's the data now, and has it helped? Thank you.
I'm sorry, just one more. Just when you're talking about the percent change as a result of COVID, I want to think about, and this could be another thing you look at later, but if the numbers change significantly, that I'm thinking of two different ways that might have happened. One, fewer people being identified for the program in certain groups, and then two, you know, did people leave from certain groups from the program somehow, right? Am I understanding correctly that you're adding people to the program in first grade and people who are new to the district? So those would be the only points where you'd be able to impact that distribution, those grades?
No, we bring children in all throughout we're constantly looking at
Reassessing.
So
So even though we have this data, today I was looking at recent STAR data
Okay.
and comparing it to time. I currently have about 25 students that I am monitoring their scores
Okay.
to see if they're going forward. I have 4 students that, now that exhibits and capstone are over, I'm going to start forward with the IQ test and hopefully bring them in. So at no time do we just say, when you're new or in first grade,
Got it.
aren't your only entry points. We have students who enter all throughout.
Thank you for clarifying, that's helpful. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
Wow.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
You too, thank you so much. Okay. Summer Temporary Workers by Chris and Roxana.
Sure. So each summer, we like to give an opportunity to our students to come and assist with some of the summer flip activities both in our garden, or all three actually, our gardens, in our custodial, and in our technology department. Now for technology, we have to flip all the Chromebooks. We get in a new supply of Chromebooks on the refresh cycle, so this year we'll be getting about 500 new ones in. Every single one of those has to be touched, enrolled, put into a case, labeled with the student's name. That just takes a lot of man hours. We don't have all that many tech staff, and some of those are school term staff, so they'll leave after we get started into the summer. So the summer workers really help a lot, especially in the technology department. And it gives them an opportunity to make a little bit of extra money. The gardens is another area where it's great to have community gardens, but we also have to make sure that those gardens are maintained in spite of the community. So summer's a great time for vacation, so we can't let a garden sit for 2 weeks without water. That would be bad. So our students assist in making sure that our gardens stay pruned, watered, and harvested. And on the custodial side, they help us clean the lockers. We've had some do some painting over the years. So there's plenty of tasks for everyone to do, and the summer is a great time to offer that opportunity to our students. So these are the job descriptions and the estimated costs and the hourly wages, and happy to answer any questions, or Roxana as well.
I would love to make a correction because I did not upload this. I see that the wage is not correct. We would be honoring, obviously, minimum wage requirements, and so we'll make that correction, just so you're aware.
I have a question. How do we drop our kids off? I mean, what do we need to do to make sure our kids can qualify? No, for any parents that are interested, or whose kids are interested, what do they need to do to?
Sure. Once the board approves these job descriptions or these positions, we'll get them posted, and Joseph Sell, our high school career counselor, will make sure that we get interviews scheduled, and over the next couple of weeks we'll interview these students and then bring them to you next month for approval.
Over the age of 14 or over the age of 16?
We take all comers. Of course, at that age we have to have worker permits.
From the principal?
From the principal, yes. So we are mindful, though, that it's important for kids to have summers too. So
We're also mindful of the fact that based on their age, there are certain jobs they cannot do.
Right.
So we have to balance,
Yeah,
Yeah.
safety.
yes. I'm glad to hear that Mr. Saucelle is involved. I'd love to see the deeper connection with the metaphor in the high school.
And actually, we haven't been able to have summer workers for a while because of COVID, so it's exciting to get them back.
Any other questions? Thank you so much, Chris. Okay, federal program review, Roxana.
Oh, here's the big fun. So, the world of federal programs has been a little crazy with all of the influx of money, but this presentation, and I'll do another one later on ESSER, this presentation is specific to the district title programs. And so many of you are pros with titles, so I'm going to try to zip through this. We do have 3 title programs that the district qualifies for. It's Title I, II, and IV. Title I is to improve the achievement of underserved populations and ensure equitable services, which can include gifted English language learners and our homeless population. Our Title I program at MRH is a school-wide program. That means that we can provide materials and services to all of our students, and our strategy has been to start as early as possible to make sure that students are getting high-quality instruction with highly qualified teachers as well as intervention services so that students start off strong and continue to achieve as they move through. Currently, we use title funds for our K through 6 buildings. We served approximately 775 plus students this year, and we are using research-based approaches to reading and math instruction, which has been under review this year, and I'll give you a little bit of an update as we move forward as to what that will look like. I think I said this already. We can also and do provide professional development as a critical component. And also, a critical part of our title programming is our collaboration with parents. And this year, one of the outcomes of our program evaluation and parent and team meetings was to revise the parent compact. So how did we serve students in Title I this year? Well, we funded some research-based instructional strategies. We provided professional development in reading, specifically our letters training. We continued our partnership with Washington University as they worked with our instructional coaches. We funded instructional coaching in reading and math. We purchased additional materials for reading and math intervention, as well as supplemental instruction specifically for grades K through 6. We tried to increase our collections of culturally responsive text for choice reading. I think I said all of that. Just a few things that I also want you to know. We do have some technology subscriptions that are paid for out of our title funding, as well as we have expended some funds for a consultant that helps us with the paperwork. And we serve as the fiscal agent for Girls Hope, Boys Hope, which is an organization that's within our district boundaries. And so they get an allocation that we manage for them. Okay, the title committee identified priorities for next school year. So the committee is recommending that we continue to provide our instructional coaching as an important component of our services. They are recommending that we provide hands-on and online materials to support literacy, mathematics, science we support out of Title IV, as well as some critical text in social studies. They are recommending that we continue professional learning in both literacy and mathematics, with a focus in literacy on phonics and in mathematics around our interventions, and continuing to support students to move forward at grade level. They are also asking that we increase our ESL supports for newcomers. That can be a presentation for another time, but we do have several newcomers, so our ELL population is growing, and we anticipate with the news that we heard from the refugee center to likely see a number of Ukrainian refugees moving in the coming year. Whether or not they'll end up in our district, I can't say, but we are a site that will be receiving. We also have 2 Afghan refugee students currently, so we can expect that number likely to increase. And then we want to continue support for social and emotional learning and safe school environments. Title II is about improving the quality and effectiveness of teachers, principals, and other school leaders. And so Title II funds were used to fund professional development opportunities. We have had a few content area consultants that have helped us. I mentioned that already in the area of reading and our partnership with Washington University in the area of mathematics. We have done book studies at the ECC around effective instructional practice. And we also manage some Title II monies that we are passed through for Little Flower School. So some of the Title II funds pass through and we serve as their fiscal agent. Title IV is about well-rounded education, and so we can spend the money on well-rounded education and enrichment. We can spend it for school climate to improve school conditions for student learning, and we can use it to improve the use of technology. And we have used money for all of those things in the past. Specifically this year, we used the money to pay for part of our science programming. We put the money into social emotional learning constructs. And again, we serve as a pass-through in Title IV for Little Flower, so some of the money actually goes there. This gives you an idea of how much money we're talking about. You can see that over the years, our funding had decreased, and then it went back up a little bit, and for next school year, they're telling us that we will not likely know our allocations until June, which is incredibly late. I normally have them to bring to you at this meeting. So we're not 100% sure what will happen for next year. Likely the funding will go down, and that is the trend that we've been seeing pretty consistently. Here's what our Title II allocation looks like. And here's our allocation for Title IV. So Title IV actually went up slightly this past year. We are also a bypass district, and that's very, I don't know that I can give you a short explanation, but just know that there's a calculation that takes some of the money that would, the money follows the child, right? So if we have students that are in Title I and they are going to non-public schools, rather than having us be fiscal agents for a number of non-public schools, they take the money off the top, and that goes through another organization that distributes the money. And so we also anxiously await every year how much of the money is going to bypass as opposed to money that we have available, and that number fluctuates. So I cannot predict for you what the Title I money will look like next year, other than to say I believe it will be less. Any questions?
Thank you. Okay, 2023-2024 academic calendar, Ed?
I realize you won't be able to see this from where you're sitting, but I want to put it up for the benefit of our online customers. So.
It is attached in the agenda item if you want to make reference to it. Roxana can pull it up if you want, Ed.
I think
You
I'm
did. Okay.
Perfect.
there. Okay. Well, the MRH Calendar Committee, which was charged with creating the 2023-24 calendar, met twice over the spring. We had very strong attendance at each meeting by the membership. Those who were unable to attend provided some very thoughtful input for the committee's deliberations. We made an effort to diversify the very composition of the committee itself this time around, with stronger representation from parents and from district support staff, which in my few years here, we've been lacking on the calendar committee. So So the first day of school is the earliest possible under the requirements of I think it was the 2018 Missouri law, which kind of governs school start dates. A key objective when building the calendar is to balance out the quarters. This is especially important for teachers who have semester-long courses. We achieved that, but once again, it necessitates ending the first semester / second quarter after the winter break. It's cold comfort, I know, but this feature is pretty commonplace among Missouri school districts these days. The winter break is 13 calendar days in length. That's one day longer than the break that we just had, one day longer than the break for the coming school year, and really the reason is that New Year's Eve falls on a Sunday, which means the observances of New Year's Eve and New Year's Day must take place on a Monday and a Tuesday. So therefore, the first day back to school in January falls on a Wednesday. Now, there was a lot of discussion about providing teachers with a planning day before students come back in January of 2024, but as you can see, that would have created a 2-day attendance day scenario in that first week back for students, and the committee decided that that would likely result in a pretty significant attendance hit. Therefore, everyone will return to classes on the same day. That's Wednesday, January 3rd, and please know that that decision was reached after committee members polled their respective cohorts, building by building, very carefully. So, also take note that the spring break in March aligns with the spring breaks in nearly all of our neighboring school districts. We hope that will be a plus for a lot of families. The committee did resolve to issue a spring break survey to families. Now, this was based on a suggestion from high school administration that a lot of families don't actually leave town during spring break and are kind of stuck in St. Louis during a cold, gloomy, damp month often. The suggestion was that an April spring break might offer a more appealing and refreshing experience for those stay-at-home families. So we intend to do that next season. And finally, for me, the most gratifying piece of this draft calendar is that the school year concludes before June. Yay. This is due in part to some just random favorable circumstances, not the least of which is that there's a leap day in 2024. So we'll take whatever we can get. So the committee asked the board to study this, what we're calling Draft C, and hopefully approve it next month. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer.
I have one question.
Mm-hmm.
I heard that the 6th graders circulated a petition to get the day after Halloween off this past year, and I was just wondering if that entered the discussion at all.
No, I'm not familiar with any.
No. Okay, just curious.
I'll look into it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And thus enter as a calendar committee member. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
Okay, SSD Sponsor Coordinator of Multi-Tiered Systems of Support, Dr. James.
Thank you. I'm most excited about this item. As you're aware, the district monitors data that informs practices around students who receive supports from special school districts. And when we look at disproportionality, we're looking at the racial and ethnic groups that are being identified for services through special school district. We are looking for placement of students in more restrictive environments. And we are also looking at students who are disciplined at a more disproportionate rate, i.e. students of color, students who have IEPs, and students who receive free and reduced lunch. We are not quite a district with disproportionality, but if we do not address the concerns that are currently being seen in the data, we could be. A proposal was made to special school district in an effort to prevent disproportionality, which actually would have cost special school district more money, and we were allocated funds to hire a MTSS coordinator and use that person to help install multi-tiered systems of support and also an integrated tiered system that includes supports from special school district. This item will be voted on tonight, and the recommendation is for the board to approve the SSD sponsored position. And I want to be clear, it is free. There is no cost for us as a district. And they would refund this position quarterly, which is how they do most positions that are funded through a special school district. I welcome any questions you may have.
thank you for, I think it's important to have that. The bonus is that it's not costing the district money, but definitely a worthwhile position that is needed.
How does this position interact with Mr. Gleason's position?
Glad you asked. Actually, part of their work includes looking at the current systems that are in place through the special school district and the interventions that they offer. We currently do not have yet a pyramid that includes both academic behavior and social emotional learning, but integrates the supports the special school district provides. So this position will also work closely with Vince Estrada for student support services. And through their work, they will create a district level MTSS team, and that team will identify screeners. So you heard Mr. Lyons talk a little bit about CASEL and some of the social emotional competencies. That information would also be included, so they would work to identify those competencies and look at screeners. The elementary school this year actually piloted the SRSS, and that particular evaluation looks at behaviors of students, whether they're internalized and internalized or externalized, and then from that data you triangulate it to look at supports. And those supports could include check-in, check-out, include supports from the counselor, or if we have youth in need and any other service provider that is funded through the Children's Service Fund. In addition, for SSD, we are also looking at those students that are specifically being impacted, which means a further look at the data and really putting supports in place for those students, which would include developing behavior intervention plans and other supports for those students who have not yet been identified. So that's what that will look like. The outcome from this work would include some installed systems of support that are operationalized and codified so that we can document that process throughout the district. It will look different at each level, but also would include some additional data collection tools so that we are better equipped to identify who those students are before or who may be at promise. And I know most people say at risk, but at promise for me. But I'm excited. I think that this work will definitely be impactful, particularly as we think about what we call child studies at the ECC or student intervention teams to look at wraparound services for students.
Any question?
Yeah, Dr. Jameson, I'm just looking at the job description. This person technically then would be reporting up to you, correct?
That person would be reporting to me and Vince.
Okay.
There will be some responsibility there.
Thank you.
I have a question. How much involvement will the school have the parents involved in this also? Because if the child getting all the wraparound, all the services, something in the home has to happen also.
That is a great question, and I actually met with Mr. Estrada, I think, one day this week. They all run together now. And that was part of the conversation as far as like roles with parents. And so with the MTSS team, district team, because of some of the information being confidential, there can be some participation, but when you begin to talk about drill down data specifically for schools, parents cannot be privy to that information. But part of that includes identifying partnerships for external services, and that's when that feedback continues to happen so that there is a continuous loop. Part of that, when I talked about outcomes, would be to have on the district website tools that parents can actually utilize. Part of that includes, for example, identifying SEL curriculum district-wide PK-12. And so I think currently we are looking at second steps for PK-8. And we are exploring for the high school what that looks like. And so when you begin to talk about universals, it's universal because everyone is getting it. And so those are some of the conversations that will be had and currently are being vetted. But a lot of that is around partnerships and making sure that parents are equipped. The other piece of that I'm excited about, which will be included when we begin to talk about tiered systems of support, would be professional support and learning for families. So I think somebody mentioned at another session, we were at Parent University, but identifying sessions monthly in a scope and sequence based on the needs of our community. So that's something I'm probably most excited about. I know that Special School District actually ran their first session ever in district for parents in person, and it was well attended, and we offered, well, in comparison to the families who RSVP'd, we felt like it was beneficial, so we are continuing to actually offer those opportunities, but being proactive for next year and having that identified for the year.
That's good, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Admin communications, COVID-19 update, Dr. Jameson.
Let's see if I can get this working. So the presentation, as I mentioned before during the last board meeting, is definitely different than the presentations that have come before you. The county has decreased the frequency by which data is being reported, and also is not reporting transmission rate. We are still continuing to see a low community level, and now with the data that's actually being shared, it's looking at bed utilization, the number of patients that are actually admitted, and then cases per 100,000. So you can see the trend. We're continuing to see for patient bed utilization a decrease, and also a decrease in hospital admissions. But when you look at cases per 100,000, there is an increase, and I'll talk a little bit about that when we get to our local data. This chart here again is from the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services. Same information, just showing that we are still in a low community level. However, when you begin to look at our zip code data in comparison to what I've been sharing in previous board meetings, we have had a slight increase for both of our zip codes. Not a very large increase, but large in addition to what we were seeing before. So for 63117, we were down to 16 new cases in the past 14 days, and then for 63143, we were around 12. And so again, same trends that we saw before are being replicated here with a slight increase, which leads into our local data. So 2 previous meetings, we were at 0 for our positivity rate. We are currently at 0.32%. The previous week was 0.21%. So you can see that there has been an increase. Of course, we did go mass recommended, and we have seen a slight increase in the data. So one of the things we discussed during the last board meeting was changing how we report the data. This is a snapshot. This will be going live next week to give our families a better picture of what that positivity rate looks like based on the threshold that we established at 1% per building. So now when our families go into the COVID resources, they can go in and look at the information by building. They are able to see the total number of persons, which includes staff and students, and any central office staff who are actually assigned to a building for more than 50% of the time. And then it also tells you at what point we actually have to remask. And so the ECC and elementary school were very close. The elementary school did have to remask this week, as provided as a mitigation to the board at the last board meeting when approved. The mask period is for 2 weeks. We will monitor that data weekly, and then once the threshold is below 1%, we will transition back to mask recommended. Here you can see the vaccination tracking report, and I actually did some calculations with the numbers because you had a slight increase from the previous board meeting, and I was very curious as to where we were as a district in comparison. So at the surface, when you look at our district data in comparison to the county, it would appear that the district is below what the county vaccination rate is, but actually we are slightly above. So we've seen an increase across the board for elementary and middle school. ECC, we have also seen an increase, but for middle school and high school, we're basically plateaued out. I don't think that number will change. And our district vaccination rate total is 62.13%, with our staff being vaccinated at 94%. If you combine student vaccination with staff vaccination, we would be around 78%, so slightly above the St. Louis County percentage at this time. And here just are the current mitigation measures as they stand, just to put back in front of our community and the board. That concludes the update on our COVID-19 report. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
So with this modification in the dashboard and this update, I want to thank you and all the admin team for working on this, because it really clarifies in a very easy way how we're doing at each building. For the ECC, we are going to be reporting the number of students who are vaccinated out of the number who are eligible, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct. Thank you for that clarifying question.
Any other questions? Thank you. Construction update, Randy?
Good evening. Construction continues. I know Ed will have some good pictures for us, so I'll make this quick. Things are progressing. I want to talk about three things basically. What work is going on in various areas, what's the budget look like, what's our timeline look like. In terms of budget, we're still pretty much on target. We have completed roughly $7.6 million worth of work, which is a little over 39% of the contract. And the contingency funds that we've used only about 37%. I kind of like to watch that balance to see where we are. We still have about $827,000 in contingency funds available, which is good news because we still have to break ground for the new big building addition. And as Chris referenced earlier, we always find surprises once we dig into the dirt. In terms of the work that's going on and the timeline, the middle school, what will be the new middle school office space, the old administrative offices just on the other side of the wall there. When we come back this time next month, Ed should have some nice pretty pictures with paint on the wall, tile on the floor, ceiling pads in. There's going to be a lot of pretty work finally happening in that space, actually in just the next 2 weeks. Down in the boiler room where the teen kitchen is going to be, the WOW space, all the new equipment. The big holdup there has been that electrical room. It seems like every time we turn around we found something new that delayed us. The transformer's been set. The new power to that should be connected next week. It's contingent upon an inspection that we hope happens tomorrow morning, and then Ameren coming out and actually turning on the new power next week. So we're a little bit at the mercy of the inspector and then Ameren for specific days, but we're getting very close. That's so important because that has to happen so that the new cooling tower can be connected to cool and actually heat the building. That allows us to tear down the old one and then start work on building A. And we're a little behind on that, so we have some work to do. The cafeteria expansion, that's one we're watching pretty closely. You've probably seen that work. They are probably going to pour the concrete floor for that middle of next week, and then the week following, the steel frame will start to go up. We have kind of a plan A and a plan B for that area. She's laughing, she knows it's coming. Because the existing cafeteria space gets renovated as well. So our goal is still to have the new addition complete and the entire space ready when kids return. But the fallback plan is that the existing space has to be fully renovated and ready to receive kids when we open school. So the worst case scenario would be that's open and it might be a week or two before we can get into the new space. But we'll continue to keep you updated on that. But because there is a kind of a tight window on timeline, I wanted to make you aware of that. Otherwise, those are the basics. There were 2 change orders that Chris shared with you, and I will just echo that everything on those change orders you have seen in the weekly memos. There's nothing new, no different numbers, whatever. Everything's included. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Opposition E, progress update, Ed.
Okay, this month's construction update video borrows its title from an Alfred Hitchcock film because that's where most of the visible work is being done right now. So we'll begin on the north. I'm sure you've noticed the bricks, which will become the new facade of the middle school office area, formerly the district central office. They arrived a couple of weeks ago. At the same time, all these parking spots adjacent to the commons are fenced off because that is an active construction work zone. Parking spaces are at a premium. That's the new cooling tower. Notice it's not covered in ivy. They're mixing their material for the fill on site so they can more easily fill cavernous pits like that one. They also have to build their own roads to access the perimeter of the cafeteria. This is really an ongoing process all around the whole construction zones. He almost dumped that on me. And that's what the outside of the cafeteria looks like right now. So what you're going to see here is all the debris that was, I guess, mined from the area where the bathrooms were located on the north side of the gym. I think that's pretty astounding. The former central office space is really beginning to take shape with the walls up and some doors installed. You can really envision what the middle school offices are going to look like in terms of the layout. Pretty sure that mid-June is the timetable for relocating the middle school offices. That's when the furniture should be here, as I recall, learning from Randy. And finally, the commons as we knew them no longer exist. On Tuesday of this week, the wrecking claw went to work on those steps, which used to be outside my old office, and which, presumably carried hundreds of thousands of pedestrians down into the commons. Yesterday and today, they continued demolishing that grassy area, that tiered seating space, I guess, where we've all enjoyed so many celebrations and concerts and fair weather lunch breaks and things like that. So that's what it looks like now. There you go.
Can we get a moment of silence for the comments?
I got a little weepy.
Thank you, Ed. Yeah. ESER 3 update, Roxana?
Well, so you get to follow the celebration of building with the ESER 3 report. I apologize in advance. I don't know how I get the fun topics, but as you are aware, the CARES Act gave all districts across the state of Missouri a fair amount of money. We have expended our ESER 1 and our ESER 2 funds. Just as a review, we got a little over $120,000 in ESER 1. We got a little over $500,000 in ESER 2. And our ESER 3 allocation is just a little over $1 million. So we had a lot of money flowing into the district. One of the requirements of the ESER 1 funding is the money was given to address the impact of COVID-19. There are several areas that I won't read to you in which you are allowed to use the funds, and there are certain areas that you are required to use funds. One of the requirements is that we have a return to learn plan and a continuity of services plan. MRH had the plans before we were required to have them, so we were in really good shape in terms of making sure that we had a viable plan to keep kids in school and to make sure that learning occurred even when we couldn't be here in person. Those plans are required to be posted publicly. They're available on our website, and we are to review the plans at least once every 6 months. So the ESER committee reconvened in March to make sure that we could take a look at all of those plans, to make sure that the plans were operating as intended. We have made some revisions to the plans based on your continued diligence in looking at mitigation measures. And so the way that we have chosen to review the plan, which is posted for you on board docs, is that our existing plan remains intact. However, there is language that shows when things have been paused, and there is language that shows the areas that currently are not allowable from the state. But we did not want to simply eliminate them from the plan, because we want to have a robust plan in case those elements should be needed in the future, and I really hope they are not. But that's the tack that we have taken. Again, I won't read to you all the aspects of that plan. You're very familiar. You've sat through countless presentations of what those are. We did do an ESSER 3 survey throughout the pandemic. We did one again in the fall, and we just have one out now. And what we identified through those surveys, and continue to identify, that our top needs really have been around social emotional supports for students and staff, and also around academic learning loss, and trying to make sure that, you know, we're making the very, very best of a situation that has been very trying. We do not have, the spring survey is set to close tomorrow, actually, so I don't have those results to present to you in this moment, but they will be something that you will be able to see. General comments were that in prior surveys, we wanted to continue to provide safe on-campus experience, help with learning gaps, address social emotional needs, and there was a strong sense that we wanted to create a return to normalcy for students. Because a lot of students reported feeling disconnected, and so that feeling of belonging and community is something that we've been working on very diligently since we returned to school. So just to remind you about the plan, we continue to engage with all stakeholders, including individuals who represent areas of particular student need. We did take public comment on the Return to Learn plan, and again, those plans are on the website. We'll continue to bring the information back to you publicly to also encourage additional public comment, and we will continue to survey. The groups that were most impacted by COVID-19, based on our monitoring and interventions at this point, appear to be students who miss the most in-person instruction. So absences and absenteeism continues to be a problem, and so it's something that we continue to monitor. As you're also aware, our plan included some wraparound services. So we wanted to make sure that we could provide flexible small group instruction for students who needed it. We wanted to provide interventions that might be pushed into the classroom or pull out based on student need. We reconfigured some advisory time, particularly at the elementary school. We wanted to increase the amount of counseling supports that kids got. We beefed up our social emotional tier 1 supports in classrooms, and we are continuing to look at that, and you'll see that in the recommendations, as well as our many partners that we have worked with in the past. Feedback from the committee was that services are progressing as planned. There was a large conversation in the committee meeting about ongoing social emotional needs that are being observed for students that are continuing. We do want to continue to reevaluate our partnerships. This MTSS coordinator that you heard about is going to be a really important part of that, and we did add a social worker this year. We have plans to add an additional counselor for next year, so those are themes that you will hear as the plan moves forward. We also felt it was very important on the return last year that students feel welcome at school, and that they we made it as stressless as possible in terms of re-engaging. You can see all the things that we planned. The feedback from the buildings and from the parents that were on the committee were that events went as planned. Parent feedback from the group was that their parents and children seem happy at school, and that any issues they felt had been addressed from their perspective. The transition seemed smooth. Parents expressed that they were very appreciative, particularly parents who were changing buildings or grade levels, that they did have the ability to visit campus in person, and then that was handled in a safe manner. So we did get some positive feedback around return in this school year. The committee also expressed appreciation for the efforts of teachers, and a huge shout out to our contact tracing team, as many districts have long discontinued that practice. Our team remains strong, and we credit a lot of our very, very low transmission rates on the hard work that's done every day by our nursing staff. Group had a long conversation about our ongoing challenges with bus drivers, and you're all well aware of our staffing challenges with some of the support staff members, and so that was a high topic of concern as we reviewed the plan. We distributed our funds based on building need first and then individual student need. The group was very complimentary also of the preschool reopening, and they thought that went really smoothly considering it had been closed for a year. We heard from parents of special education students that felt that the services to special education students during the reopening had been responsive, and nothing but good news about the expanded social work team. So the people in the buildings especially were very, very complimentary of that support. So we do have to spend 20% of the funds for the ESSER plan to address learning loss. We have planned to do that in the following ways. We have been providing after-school learning labs in math and reading to students that have been identified by benchmark data. We do have plans to offer some free enrichment programming this summer. And so in addition to our regular summer school programming, we have a few other options that will become available in the next few weeks. We have been providing high-dose tutoring, and we've done that in a wide variety of ways, and that's embedded in the school day so that students are getting additional support in addition to classroom instruction. As I mentioned, we added a social worker, and we continue to look at social emotional learning with the goal of selecting and implementing a Tier 1 social emotional support curriculum for all students. We were all geared up to implement this plan. As you're also aware, DESE was late to release the money, so we were just able to get a lot of these things in place shortly after the beginning of second semester. DESE also gave us additional criteria that we had to follow, so many of the structures that we had planned for do no longer meet the criteria, for example, for high-dose tutoring, so that had to be rethought. So it is in operation, and we have amended our data collection to allow us to collect the money based on the new criteria. All of the other things that we also will buy with the plan, continuing with our mitigation supplies, staffing. As you are aware, we offered a training stipend for COVID-19 safety and implementation. We have contact tracing stipends for our frontline nursing staff. We've purchased a number of intervention supplies, as well as funding our technology so that we can guarantee one-to-one access and our internet hotspots for students who need it. So other concerns that came up as part of our review of plans. So there was a lot of discussion about our students who are under 5 that are not eligible for vaccination, and the idea that in our preschools we want to maintain all of our mitigation measures because that is working, and so we reaffirmed the desire to make sure that that continued. They also wanted to see a continued emphasis on assessment and progress monitoring. So again, the MTSS coordinator position that you heard in order to continue to accelerate student learning. They also thought about really doing some planning around re-engaging parents and re-inviting parents back into the building. It's been a minute. It was very common for us to have an army of parents with us every day, and that stopped during the pandemic. So thinking about a thoughtful strategy of inviting people back in and doing that in a safe and welcoming way. And then parents also raised the issue of Zoom fatigue. So just the idea of information overload. We know communication is critical. We know that information to families and family partnership is critical, but there was some sense of Zoom meetings and emails were becoming less and less attractive as folks are just very tired. And so we are still trying to think through what that might mean in terms of our ability to communicate efficiently and effectively with our parent groups. And then finally, we did add this year, actually last year when we returned, and then moving into this year, extra teaching assistants in the building to help us be able to provide direct services to kiddos who might be dysregulated or needing a little extra attention. We also made sure that we had permanent subs in every building that are with us every day, so that if teachers had to be out, we would have continuity of instruction. Again, we heard nothing but positive response about the results of those extra staff, and so there is also a recommendation to continue the teaching assistants and at least one permanent sub in the building for next year. And that is my ESSER 3 report.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, finance, March financial statements, Chris?
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm just sitting, thinking I was all done.
That's very small.
I know. I'm redoing it. It's like connected, but not all the way. Since I'm not standing up there. You can do it this way. Okay. The right spot here. Well, good evening again. These are our March financial statements. The items of interest do a pretty good job of going over the 30,000-foot view. So I won't read those to you. They're here for you to review. I will touch on a couple of items on revenue that we're looking at. All in all, revenue is tracking as we would on the local level. County is a little bit delayed. We're still waiting on the state assessed utility tax. I did see that check come in. It just came in, and it'll be booked in April, not March. State is also lagging just slightly, and again, that's timing. We're not concerned about that at all. And I apologize, but when I went full screen, it messed up the alignment, so let me fix this so we're all looking at the same thing. Okay. Debt service, again, that tracks right along with local, so May, early June is when we're holding our breath, waiting for those protested taxes to be released by the county collector. So we have no reason to believe that that is not going to happen. So we're awaiting that, and it looks like we're tracking on the budget on the local tax revenues right as we expected. On the expenditure side, this is the breakdown. So just about 79% of our operating expenses are on the salary and benefits side, which is meaning we're investing in our people, which is a fantastic thing. I will skip down to page 9 to give you the expense at the object level. Salaries and benefits tracking just like we expect. Also on the purchase service, we are lagging a little bit on supplies. We start to shut down purchasing right around mid to end April, and that's so that we can get all of our make sure we get all of our bills paid for this year out the door. We're still awaiting invoices, so for the most part, a lot of the reason for this is the way we budget, but folks have been able to plan out their expenses over the course of the year. So by the end of April, we're pretty much done. You'll see utilities, those types of things come through. Principal and interest is done for the year. You'll see construction expenses continue out throughout the year, but for the most part, the major expenses are done unless something breaks in the high school, which it typically does, related to HVAC. So as temperatures start to warm, we would expect to see some of those expenses come through as well. Capital outlay is right where it ought to be. Like I mentioned, debt service is done for the year, except for some fees that we expect to come through. And the bond issue funds, really the only, we're expending those. You see those coming through on the warrant list with our pay apps from contractors. it seems as though I'm missing the last page of my slide. It got cut off. So we are still at this point budgeting for a 46.3% fund balance at the end of the year. We will get a budget amendment in next month. We'll have a truer look. I expect that number to move around a little bit. As I'm looking through at the account level, I see there's some items that are under expended, some that are slightly over budget. That all tends to balance out in the end, and we will make some adjustments and bring those to you in May, and then we'll bring you a final budget amendment in June. This is for the benefit of our newer board members. We'll go over that a little bit together in the coming month. But for all intents and purposes, the finances of the district are in a very strong position, and I welcome any questions you might have.
Chris, do you mind just repeating what's the fund balance percentage, please?
Currently it's 46.3. Budgeted at 46.3.
Any other questions? Fiscal year 23 budget presentation 3.
Okay. This is the one I really like to deliver to you. I'm that strange person that enjoys budgets.
This is very true.
I actually look forward to working on the budget.
He's the only one. Yes.
It's like a Rubik's Cube. Okay. So I brought to you last month the TIFs. There's no changes here. I just left the slide in here for the benefit of our newer board members. Our projected revenues have not changed. However, I will say that you will see likely a different number here. We have not calculated into our local tax receipts the recoupment. We do still have some recoupment left on the residential side and also on the commercial side. So we're also looking at, as St. Louis County Tax Commission cases are closed, some potential lost revenues there that we may adjust rates for in the coming year. Lots more on tax rates in the coming months, but we'll make some adjustments. We'll add a few pennies to both of those projected levies and those will be reflected in this slide here. Again, there's no changes here. We will be probably making some adjustments to all of these as we get a truer look. As we get further into the spring, we start getting more accurate numbers from all of the agencies from which we receive funding. So it's all a very educated guess. So we do the best we can with the information we have on hand. Here's a schedule that shows. Don't be alarmed at the 1.1 million decrease. If you look at what that source is, you'll see that the budget for 2022 has a large amount of federal revenues as it relates to COVID. That's going away, and it's not repeated in fiscal 23. So that's really just a correction. If you look to 19 and 20, you'll see a more accurate look of where federal revenues can be expected to be seen for the following year. This is just a graphical representation. Positions, there's no changes here. We are actively interviewing and bringing people on board, some of which you'll approve this evening. Salaries, we made a few adjustments here. As we do bring people on board, we make adjustments in position control to reflect more accurately what our salaries and benefits rates will be. We would expect to see benefits higher than salaries because the retirement is factored into here as well. It's not just the medical benefits. Purchase services are still down at this point. However, I will say purchase services and supplies are still moving around in the budget. We're still making adjustments based on the budget meetings, and we will be discussing priorities in some of our capital projects. As we go through here, we'll be making some adjustments based on priorities. As we look at the bottom line, we're getting a truer look at what the budget could potentially look like. These are some capital projects that I've identified in conjunction with the various teams that I've been working with. At the Early Childhood Center, we have a need for some interactive boards. We also have some of the things that have been delayed for the last few years, delayed maintenance as we call them. As boring as it is, crack sealing and restriping parking lots is a lot cheaper than new parking lots. So we need to spend some time and attention there. It is the elementary's turn for a faculty MacBook refresh. We keep those in service for 4 years, and it is now time to replace those. They have one of our larger faculty bodies, and we're also adding a few for our additional staff. If you've been on Glade Circle, you'll see that it is in need of some repair. So we've gotten some early numbers on the curbs and repaving that circle so that it is safe and inspirational once again. Middle school, again, interactive boards. It won't be this exact brand, but you'll see some interactive boards very similar to this that'll be going into our new middle school classroom spaces. So I'm really excited about that. It's a similar technology, it's just a different brand. And we've, with one of our local vendors we've partnered with, and we're actually getting one of those over at the ECC in the next month or so, so I'm excited to give that a pilot. And PLTW is short for Project Lead the Way, which is a new program that we've fired up at the high school this year. It's part of our college and career trajectory. And they need a class set of MacBooks of 25, and unfortunately they're not the cheapest computer, but it is what's needed for that program, and this was a planned expense as the program ramps up and adds capacity over the coming years. The Student Success Center, it needs a little bit of attention as well. Front stairs are in ill repair, and we need to put a rail there. High school and middle school, you've started seeing communications from both Randy and me related to the high school, middle school HVAC. We will be budgeting to either repair or replace a certain number of those units, and we have a couple of other ideas that we'll be bringing to you in the coming months. Theater repairs, that theater is now pushing 20 years old. Can you believe it?
No.
And it is in need of some upgrades. I've been working with Emily Baker, our technical theater director, and we are going to try as hard as we can to make some modifications to our lighting systems so that our kids and our staff don't have to go up and down in that lift as much, making a safer scenario for all involved. And also making some repairs to a few of the seats and flooring and in general brightening things up. At all of our schools, we'll be replacing iMacs on most of the secretaries and registrars' desks. Mac technology in general is moving pretty quick, but the ones on their desk, while they do function, they're aging out as far as the operating systems and some of the newer technologies, so it's time for them to go, and we need our people functioning as efficiently as possible. Debt, we pay off anywhere from $3.8 to $4.2 million in debt annually. This next year we're scheduled to spend about a little over $4 million in debt, which is principal and interest, on our bonded indebtedness. Here's a schedule which represents everything I've discussed here. And for our newer board members, I mention this every month, but in the 2022 budget, current budget, you'll notice $54 million. That's just because we budgeted all of the construction expenses. Of course, we didn't spend nearly that much. So the remainder of the construction expenses that are not expended at the end of this fiscal year will be rolled over into the following year. So I hope to have those in there for you to look at next month. I've been told that the bar charts are a much better representation as to pie graphs. Here's the bar chart of the expenses and where they fall and the trend over time. Here's another one that's probably too small to see from my position here, but if you're looking at it on your screen, we're right now budgeting for about 37.2% fund balance at the end of 2023. We will continue preparing these expense budgets. I do allocate time to it every single day. We'll continue working on those until I feel they're right. We will be sending the budgets out to the principals and the directors to do final approval and sign off on their budgets. Then comes the fun work of the budget document, making sure that that 100-something page document is all tight and ready for consumption and for you to approve when it comes into June. Any questions?
No question, just a comment to pay attention to the projected number on the fund balance and know that the key is to plan early on that. So just a word of warning for all of us to start paying attention to that.
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, I think we've done a good job, especially in board meetings, of continuing to articulate the additional people power that has been brought into the district during COVID and how that ties to, you know, filling gaps in, you know, student experience. We can't take our eye off of that. And, you know, being able to tell the story to voters doesn't happen just when we go out for increase, right? So, again, good job. Let's continue to think about creative ways to remind folks that it is expensive to run a district, and the results are being paid for.
And how lucky we were that we were sitting at
Yes.
that fund balance when COVID hit.
Exactly.
Because, you know, our neighboring districts they weren't as blessed, right? So, yeah, you're right, Katie, building the narrative continually rather than
Yeah.
when we're in the face of any potential crisis.
Yeah. And I think it's easy to point to things like, you know, new smart board technology, you know, but that's really not the expensive stuff, right? It's the quality of people that we have.
Yeah, and you saw from our financial presentation for the last month's financials, nearly 80% of our expenditures are related to staffing.
Right.
Our investment is in our people, not
Yeah.
our things.
I just want to add, just as a reminder, with MSIP 6 transitioning in, that there is a strong piece around fund balance, and the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education will be evaluating districts, and depending where your fund balance is, we have to justify why we are not either spending down and where those expenditures are going. So I know I continue to put that information in front of the board. Just want to remind us that that is a piece of the new MSIP work that's coming forward. And for our new board members, I will continue to have conversations regarding MSIP 6 and the changes, which are still happening. They're building it by flies as we move forward.
Is MSIP only looking at the fund balance as a point in time, or are they allowing districts to show, as we can illustrate, drawdown on that fund balance based on current conditions?
At this point, it's point in time, and we have not received any additional information regarding how they're going to evaluate that or what documentation they will be requesting from school districts to discuss or even demonstrate why fund balances are either high or low. So that information has not yet been received, but I did want to put that reminder out.
Again, I really don't see us adjusting the way that we've been thoughtfully considering our fund balance just because DESE wants something arbitrary. So.
What she said.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kurt. Calendar of events. So we've got a work session coming up on 5/5. As of right now, that is still on. Party for Joe's Place on 5/6. 5/21 is the Taste of Maplewood. We are canceling the work session on June 2nd, since that is the day before graduation. Graduation, June 3rd. How exciting. I can't believe it's gone by so fast, another year. I'm so excited for our graduates. And as of May, all of our meetings will be virtual, including the regular board meeting, because of construction in this area.
Brandy, I just highlight the Legislative Advocacy Committee meeting on May 20th. That's something we do in cooperation with Webster Groves and a few other of the districts around us. I have not been able to attend those this year, but I would note that the legislature ends their session the week before, so that meeting may be a good just sort of recap opportunity if it's happening. I'm not sure if those have been moved to in person or if they've been happening just virtually, but especially for newer board members, it may be an opportunity to understand the impact of decisions in Jeff City on us going forward.
And I would definitely say to our newer members, the thing that I found the most shocking when I joined the board was what's happening in our legislature and how it affects us, and how few people have a voice in that legislature that are actually impacted by the decisions that it makes. So I concur with Katie that's a great opportunity. Maria, were you gonna say something? Okay. Okay, that's all I have for calendar of events. Is there a report for CBTF?
Sure.
Doesn't need to be.
And for our new members, one of the things that was also hard for me were the acronyms, because I didn't know any of them.
CBTF is Compensation Benefits Task Force. It felt like we were kind of rounding out the year, did a little bit of review and some looking forward. Still a desire to continue discussing competitiveness of our salary schedule, to make sure we remain competitive, looking at what we want to look for in the future, still continuing to look at different leave packages, benefits. We're going to look at the extra duty contract tonight, approve it, maybe. Oh, no, it was approved. That happened. Let's see. We reviewed some things about coaches and coaches' pay. It was a very quick meeting. Amber, anything you want to add?
I don't think so. That captured it, but it was good to hear from folks about what the looking ahead goals and desires are from that committee to focus on the next calendar school year.
And I'm still just, it's still the thoughtfulness that every question that is brought to that task force, that the thoughtfulness that's given to every single question is lovely to watch.
Thank you. Wellness Committee?
The Wellness Committee met this past Monday. It was my first Wellness Committee meeting. We talked around a scope of issues, including some of the food service challenges that we've been having, and I know we're going to be talking at the board level about some possible ways to address that going forward. It was discussed and noted that the USDA waivers will expire at the end of June, so we really want to be very forward-facing and messaging to our families that we need to do that free and reduced lunch registration. A suggestion was made about having laptops available at back-to-school night to really encourage people to fill out those forms. We've all done it. It's easy if you're opting out. It's very quick. So the committee had some great ideas for how to increase participation in turning those in. We discussed the updates to the COVID dashboard. And then we had a really productive conversation around really starting to develop a continuum of offerings, both trainings to staff and trainings to students around the suicide prevention and sexual abuse prevention mandated curriculum. There's been some work done in trying to kind of connect those pieces between the buildings and sort of create a life cycle so that when you're starting in second grade and ending in 12th grade, there is a logical progression to that. So I think we'll be looking forward to a recommendation coming forward eventually about how to evolve that training and bring that forward a little bit more comprehensively. And we also talked a bit about an employee wellness for yoga class benefit. So I don't know if you were able to make any progress on that, Vince, but people have recommendations for yoga teachers. They were being accepted.
Thank you, Amber. I have a quick question. You mentioned with the free and reduced lunch forms that even if people are opting out,
yes,
please fill it out.
Yes, absolutely.
And opt out, which I didn't know about. So just wanted to reiterate that for our families. Even if you're opting out, please fill out the form. Okay.
Very important for our federal funding.
Okay.
Yes.
Very, very important for our federal funding.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Very, very, very important.
And maybe we need to find a way to make sure it's communicated to the parents because, I mean, I didn't know. So, if they don't know, if they don't require, they're not going to fill it out. So it has to be a way to communicate so they understand. You know you don't need it, but still opt out because of federal funding. It's just like attending to the school. It's federal funding. Kids need to be here. You need to show up. So make sure they're going to understand how important the forms are.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Okay, fundraising committee.
Right. Well, we have a week left in our fundraising campaign for the Nelson Mitten Scholarship. So I know that all of our board members have made their donations online.
Sure.
Well played.
So easy.
And I know you've shared it on your own Facebook pages with your networks to encourage your friends and family to donate as well. So I'll be looking forward to seeing all those totals pouring in.
You didn't do a TikTok, did you?
That's your
You will never
department.
see me on TikTok. Some great news. We don't have a total right now as to where we are in terms of the overall campaign, but just sitting here are photocopies of $1,300 worth of checks from our vendors. So let's just reflect on asking works. So thanks to Francis and Maria for encouraging us to reach out to those vendors. I'm going to be reviewing the prospect list again and just seeing, you know, if there are some individual follow-ups that we can all be doing to some of those businesses that we solicited. But I think that's a great result for the significant amount of work that Ed and his team put in getting all of this out. So thank you.
Thank you to you and Ed and your team.
Absolutely.
Hopefully we'll have an update via email on where we are in terms of progress so that we can ensure that we're on track to meeting that $3,000 goal by the 29th.
Thank you. Board liaison, oh, sorry, Joe's place, I skipped myself. Well, we have May 6th is the party, so that is really our big event. So everybody who can, please attend.
Brandy, with the Joe's Place, I seem to remember that there, and it could be a false memory, that we had mentioned an opportunity to bring the board of Joe's Place together with the school board. I don't know that there's been, you know, connection with all of us in quite some time. I think just with the evolving nature of the needs of the district, as well as, you know, like the community, it would be fruitful to get together at some point. I don't know if you and the district staff team who are involved with Joe's Place could broach that with the Joe's Place board, but I think it's worth making sure we're all on the same page for the future.
Yes, and we had discussed it, and everybody was on board to do it, and then we had quite a bit of transition with house parents and stuff going on with the board, and so that is definitely, I at least have dropped that ball, so I will pick that back up and start running with it.
Great.
And we also have an opening for a new board member from our board.
Yes.
On Joe's Place board. Excellent. Okay, so SSD Governing Council.
There was no meeting since the last.
Perfect.
Nothing new.
Nothing new. So we are going to send out some emails with regard to the committees for our new members, just describing who's on the committees and what the committees are. What I would be expecting is to leave everybody who's on a committee on that committee unless they tell me otherwise. And then just add our new board members to some committees. How does that sound? Excellent. Okay.
Fabulous. Wonderful.
All right. Action items.
Move to approve the construction change orders as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Move to reapprove the suspended MRH universal mitigation measures.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Summer workers?
Move to approve the summer worker positions with modified salary as presented.
Good job.
Good
Second.
job. Good. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Fiscal year 22 E-rate contracts?
Go ahead.
Move to approve the E-rate contracts as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Athletics, tennis.
Move to approve the athletics tennis recommendation as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Athletics pole vault.
I'm very excited about this one. I move to approve the athletics pole vaulting recommendation as presented. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. SSD sponsored coordinator of multi-tiered systems of support.
I move to approve the special school district sponsored coordinator of multi-tiered systems of support position as presented.
I will second that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So, to our new board members, we have a tradition here where the newer board members will take us into executive session. Since we have two at one time, I think we should alternate. What do you guys think? All right, so who wants to go first today?
I move to enter executive session in accordance with the section 610.021, subsections 1, 3, 9, and 13, and section 610.022 of the revised statutes of Missouri on April 21st, 2022, for the following specific reasons: personnel matters, legal matters.
Second. Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Roll call.
No, you're right.
So you're
Second.
second.
Okay, and now roll call, please.
Ms. Langston?
Yes.
Ms. Goldman?
Yes.
Ms. Hazelwood?
Here.
Ms. Whitcomb?
Yes.
Yes.
Ms. Robinson?
Here.
Ms. Hoffman?
Yes.
Ms. Herman Miller?
Yes. Okay, motion carries. We are in executive session. 5-minute break.
Hurry.
And